A poor girl took a homeless man home not knowing he was a millionaire CEO. What he did shocked everyone. Before we begin, leave a comment letting us know where you are watching from. Enjoy the story. The early morning sky over Seattle hung low with clouds, the kind of dense gray that soaked the city in gloom before a single drop of rain had even touched the ground. The wind was biting for spring, slipping through jackets and reminding everyone that warmth was a privilege, not a guarantee. Emily Carter dashed out of the metro station, nearly losing her balance as she hit the crowded sidewalk. She had exactly 9 minutes to reach Hamilton Tower for the most important job interview of her life. Her hands were full resume folder in one hand, a brown paper bag with 2 cheese croissants in the other. Her phone, tucked under her chin as she ran, read 7:51 a.m. The interview was scheduled for 8 o'clock. Exactly. 8 minutes. 7 blocks. She could make it. She had to. Emily wore her best, which wasn't saying much. A black blazer 2 sizes too large, thrifted heels that pinched her toes, and a navy blouse she'd ironed on the floor that morning because her apartment didn't have a table. Her dark brown hair was tied back in a shaky bun, and she dabbed concealer under her eyes to cover the sleepless night. This was her 3rd interview in 2 weeks. Her refrigerator was nearly empty. Her electricity bill was overdue. And the tiny studio apartment she called home had no heat, just a rattling space heater she'd borrowed from her neighbor. Still, she pressed on. Today had to be different. "Excuse me, sorry," she murmured as she weaved through business people sipping overpriced coffee and ignoring the existence of anyone who didn't wear designer. She gripped the paper bag tighter. Those croissants were more than breakfast, they were her only food for the day. The bakery clerk, a kind, middle-aged woman named Rosa, had given her a discount and 2 butter packets on the house. A car splashed through a nearby puddle, barely missing her. 7:55. 5 minutes. 4 blocks. She turned the corner onto 5th Avenue, where the building loomed like a glass mountain in the distance. But her heel caught on a lifted crack in the sidewalk, and just like that, her momentum betrayed her. Time slowed. Emily fell hard onto the cold concrete. Her palms scraped. Her resume folder flew out of her hand and landed in a puddle. The brown paper bag with the croissants tore open midair and dropped, in what felt like cruel slow motion, into a dirty gutter. Her breath hitched. Pain radiated from her knee. A ripple of shock froze her in place as people walked around her, annoyed. A man stepped over her bag without even looking down. A woman muttered, "Watch it," and kept going. Her chest tightened. This can't be happening. Not today. Please, not today. Emily knelt there, trembling. Her eyes burned with frustration. Everything, all her hope, all her effort felt like it was bleeding out into the street through the holes in her stockings and the tears in her pride. And then a voice. It was deep, calm, oddly still, as if it had broken through all the noise of the city to find her. "Are you okay?" She looked up. A man stood a few feet away, under the rusted frame of a bus shelter. He was wearing a tattered gray hoodie, jeans with frayed cuffs, and scuffed sneakers that had clearly seen better years. His beard was rough, thick, and slightly curled at the edges. His hands were stuffed into his pockets. By all appearances, he was homeless. But his voice, it was wrong for his look. It was smooth, sure, and strangely steady, the voice of someone used to being listened to. He walked slowly toward her, his eyes focused, but not condescending. They weren't pitying, either. Just present. She tried to get up quickly, embarrassed, brushing mud off her knees. "I'm fine," she said hastily, choking back the sting of tears. "I'm just late." He watched her for a moment. "You're bleeding." "I don't have time," she said, reaching for her resume folder and wincing as her knee throbbed. The pages were soaked, smudged. He crouched beside her and offered something in his hand, a white cloth. A handkerchief. Clean, she blinked. Where did you get that? Does it matter? He replied. Press it to your knee. The cold will help. Against all her instincts, she took it. His fingers brushed hers for a brief second. They were warm. Too warm for someone who'd spent the night outside. She pressed the cloth to her knee and winced. Ruined everything, she muttered. No, you didn't. She looked at him again. His eyes weren't just calm, they were observant. Deep. Intelligent. People fall, he said softly. It's what you do after that counts. Emily gave a bitter laugh. That sounds like something you read off a poster. It's something I lived, he replied, dead serious. There was silence between them. Then, slowly, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a bill, folded, crisp. $100 bill. She froze. I can't take that, she said instantly, backing away slightly. That's not right. Take it, he said gently. Buy a new shirt. Get yourself cleaned up. Go to your interview. Her eyes filled with confusion. Why would you help me? He tilted his head. Because you're still trying, even when the world clearly doesn't want you to. Emily swallowed. She didn't want to cry in front of him. Not again. He placed the bill in her hand, then stood. If you leave now, you'll make it, he said, glancing at her phone. 7th floor. Our manager's name is Rachel. She likes straight shooters. Emily stared. How do you know that? But he was already walking away, pulling the hoodie tighter around himself. She turned to say thank you, but when she glanced back, he was gone. Emily stepped into the sleek, mirrored lobby with her heart pounding. Her new blouse, bought with the stranger's money, still had a price tag she'd have to return later. Her shoes were soaked, but her chin was high. The receptionist smiled. You must be Emily Carter. They're expecting you. She blinked. Wait, what? HR said to send you up the moment you arrived. She didn't understand. But she stepped into the elevator with trembling fingers and a heart that hadn't felt this alive in a long time. What she didn't know was that the man she met in the street wasn't a beggar. He was Michael Carter, founder and former CEO of Carter Dynamics, one of the most powerful tech firms in the Pacific Northwest. He had vanished from the public eye a month ago after a scandal rocked the corporate world, and he had just begun changing her life before she even knew his name. It was past 7 p.m. when Emily walked back home, her shoulders heavy with disappointment. The sky had surrendered to darkness, and Seattle's streetlights flickered to life like sleepy sentinels watching over the lonely and tired. She had made it to the interview thanks to the $100 bill from the man in the hoodie. She'd cleaned up in the bathroom of a CVS, bought a cheap blouse from a sidewalk vendor, and made it into the office just in time. The HR manager, Rachel, had been kind, warm even, and seemed impressed with Emily's ideas and portfolio. But in the end, it was the same rehearsed line. We're very impressed, but we've already moved forward with another candidate. We'll keep your resume on file. They always kept her on file. No one ever called. She unlocked the door to her apartment, a cramped, one-room space that barely fit her fold-out futon and second-hand desk, and walked in without turning on the light. What was the point? The bulb above the sink had gone out. The only thing still glowing was the red light on her prepaid electric meter, reminding her she had about one more day of power before it cut off. Emily dropped her bag, leaned against the wall, and slid slowly to the floor. Her knees still ached from the fall. Her pride hurt even more. The croissants she lost earlier weren't just breakfast. They had been a small comfort, a tiny luxury. She hugged her knees to her chest and sat in the dim quiet for a long time. Then, movement. through the dusty window facing the street. She saw him, the man from that morning. He was sitting under the shelter of a closed bodega across the road, arms wrapped around himself against the growing cold. His hoodie was pulled low, but there was no mistaking him. He was hunched over like he hadn't eaten in days. He gave her $100, and now he was alone in the dark. That wasn't right. Emily stood slowly. Her heart thudded with nerves, but something deeper than fear pushed her forward. She slipped on her sneakers, grabbed a container of leftover pasta from her fridge, her last real meal, and crossed the street. Across the street, 7:38 p.m. He didn't look up when she approached. "I brought food," she said gently. Slowly, he turned toward her. "You again," he said softly. "I figured I owed you dinner," she said. "And I had too much left over." He smiled faintly, though his eyes looked tired. "You didn't have to, I know," she replied. "But I wanted to." He studied her for a beat, as if trying to decide if she was serious. "Come on," she said. "It's not much, but it's warm." Emily's place was nothing glamorous: scuffed wood floors, a creaky ceiling fan, and one kitchen cabinet that wouldn't close properly. But it was clean, lived in, real. Mike stepped inside slowly, his gaze scanning the walls like he hadn't been in a home for a long time. "You can sit," she said, gesturing toward the futon couch. "It doesn't bite, mostly." He chuckled and sat, his hands resting on his knees. She reheated the pasta, added salt and a little hot sauce, and poured them each a glass of water. When she handed him the plate, he took it with both hands, reverently like it was a feast. "This is the best thing I've smelled in weeks," he said, and she smiled despite herself. They ate in silence for a while. Then she asked softly, "You never told me your name." He looked up. "It's Mike." She nodded. "I'm Emily." They locked eyes for a moment, something unspoken passing between them. Not attraction, not yet, just recognition of weariness, of survival. He looked around her apartment. "You live here alone?" She nodded. "Yeah." "No roommates? No boyfriend?" "Nope. Just me and that leaky faucet over there," she said, pointing. He chuckled. "I've lived in worse." She tilted her head. "You don't talk like someone who's out here." Mike paused, then wiped his mouth and set his plate down. "I wasn't always," he admitted. "I had money, a company, even a house in the hills. Then I lost all of it." She leaned forward, curious. "What happened?" He didn't answer right away. Then, trust. I gave it to the wrong people. Business partners. A woman I was going to marry. They took everything. And when it all collapsed, I realized how fake it had all been. The money. The parties. The admiration. None of it was real. Emily said nothing. She listened. He looked down. I disappeared. I wanted to see what life was like without the masks, without the brand names. I didn't expect to end up on the street, though. "And yet you still gave me money," she said, her voice cracking. He glanced at her. "Because you were still trying. That matters." They sat in silence. Then he said, "You remind me of someone I used to be." Emily frowned. "A broke, messy woman with pasta sauce on her sleeve?" He smiled. Someone who hadn't given up yet." She offered him a blanket and a pillow for the couch. He tried to decline. "You already did enough," he said. "I don't want to take your space." But she insisted. "I'm not going to let someone who helped me freeze on the street. And besides," she hesitated, "I trust you." His expression shifted not with pride, but with pain. "Thank you," he said softly. She turned off the light and crawled into bed. But sleep didn't come easily, not because she was afraid, but because a stranger had just walked into her life and nothing felt scary about it. It felt like the beginning of something she couldn't explain. The morning sunlight slipped through Emily's curtains like golden threads, quiet and gentle. The warmth on her face stirred her from sleep, but for a moment, she lay still, listening. Silence. Then, the faint clinking of metal against ceramic, her brows furrowed. Was someone in her kitchen? She sat up slowly and crept out of bed, her socked feet making no sound on the cold floor. When she peeked into the kitchenette, she froze. Mike was standing by the stove, not just standing cooking. He'd found the last 2 eggs she'd been saving, cracked them carefully, and was now scrambling them with what looked like leftover vegetables and a bit of cheese. The smell was incredible, and he looked different. He'd shaved, trimmed his beard neatly. His hair had been brushed back, and his posture had changed straighter, more commanding. Even in the same worn clothes, he looked like someone reborn. "You're cooking?" she said, rubbing her eyes. He turned with a small smile. "Hope you don't mind. I noticed your fridge was hanging on by a thread, so I figured I'd use what you had before it spoiled." She blinked. "No, I didn't expect it." He handed her a plate. "I added paprika, just a little. You looked like you needed flavor in your life." She laughed despite herself and sat down on the futon. They ate in comfortable quiet until Emily broke it. "You're not just a guy who fell on hard times, are you?" Mike didn't respond immediately. He stared at his plate for a moment, then set it aside. "I told you," he said finally. "I used to run a company." "Which company?" she pressed gently. He hesitated, then looked her in the eyes. "Carter Dynamics." Emily's fork paused mid-air. She blinked. "That? No way. Carter Dynamics? As in the Carter Dynamics? Tech apps? AI development? Security systems?" He nodded slowly. Her heart pounded. She remembered the news headlines, the articles, the controversy, the disappearance. "You vanished," she whispered. "Everyone said you went into hiding after your COO leaked those fake embezzlement files." Mike exhaled heavily. "He was my best friend. I handed him the keys to the kingdom, and he used them to lock me out." Emily's mind spun. "But you're Michael Carter, billionaire, tech genius, on the cover of Forbes last year." "Was," he corrected. "Now I'm Mike, the guy who found peace in silence." She set her plate down, heart thumping in her chest. "But why? Why disappear?" He looked away. "Because I forgot who I was. I built a machine, and in the process I became part of it. No one told me the truth anymore. Everyone wanted something: money, power, exposure. Even the woman I was going to marry." His voice cracked slightly. "She said she loved me. But when the board voted me out, she disappeared. Left a note that said, 'I'm not built for broken men.'" Emily's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He met her gaze. "You didn't flinch when I said I was homeless. You didn't ask me for anything. You gave me pasta, a couch, and your trust. That's more than anyone in my life has given me in months." Her voice was small. "I just did what I hoped someone would do for me." Mike smiled. "Exactly." Mike left for a few hours. Said he needed to make a few calls. Emily wasn't sure what that meant, but something inside her shifted. Her hands shook as she washed the dishes. Her thoughts raced. He's Michael Carter, a man the world thought was missing, the kind of man whose name turned heads, and he had slept on her couch, cooked her eggs, cleaned up after himself, and offered her more kindness than most men with nothing to prove. Her phone buzzed. A new email from Rachel.Timmons@carterdynamics.com. Subject: Quick follow. Up, dear Emily. I'd like to reconnect with you. One of our senior advisors just flagged your portfolio and requested an internal review. Can you stop by the office tomorrow morning? No interview, just a meeting. Best. Rachel Timmons, Director of Talent Acquisition. Emily gasped. How? She stared at the screen. Then the door creaked open. Mike stepped in, holding a brown paper bag. I got groceries, he said. Hope you like peanut butter. She ran up to him and held the phone in front of his face. What did you do? She asked, breathless. He smiled softly. I made a call. You said you didn't want to go back. I don't, he replied. But I never said I didn't want to build something new. And maybe, just maybe, that starts with helping you. Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The man she thought was a beggar was a billionaire. But it wasn't the money that left her breathless. It was that in her darkest hour, he hadn't saved her because he was rich. He saved her before she knew who he was. And somehow, that made all the difference. Emily stood outside the gleaming glass tower of Carter Dynamics, clutching a loner blazer and trying to keep her nerves under control. The last time she'd walked into this building, she was a nervous wreck, soaked, scraped, and doubting every bit of herself. But this time was different. This time, they were expecting her. Her reflection in the mirrored glass doors barely looked like the girl from 2 weeks ago. Her hair was neat, her blouse tucked and pressed, and her shoes borrowed from a neighbor again made her feel taller, stronger. As she walked through the lobby, heads turned. She didn't know it yet, but a few of them recognized her from somewhere, not just as a potential new hire, but from the rumors swirling in hushed conversations throughout the company. Is that her? The girl he stayed with? They say she found him on the street. She stepped into the elevator, her pulse quickening as the doors shut. Rachel Timmons, Carter Dynamics head of talent, greeted her with a warm smile. Emily, so glad you came. I'm still a little confused, Emily admitted, trying to hide her nerves. Rachel gestured to a private conference room with floor-to-ceiling views of downtown Seattle. Inside was a folder and a contract. You're not here for another interview, Rachel said as she closed the door. You're here because Michael Carter personally vouched for you. And in this company, that's not just rare, it's never happened before. Emily blinked. Who what? Rachel smiled gently. Michael's return to the company isn't official, but let's just say he still has a lot of influence. He asked us to fast-track your hiring, but not just as a designer, as a division lead for a new initiative. A division lead? Emily echoed. I don't have the experience. Yet, Rachel said. But you have something most people here don't. You brought a man like Michael Carter back from the dead. Emily felt her throat tighten. She wasn't just being hired. She was being trusted. Meanwhile, across the city, a blurry cell phone photo was posted anonymously online. Michael Carter, alive, outside a grocery store, with a woman. The post exploded within hours. Blogs picked it up. Then tabloids. Then the mainstream media. Former Carter Dynamics CEO spotted after month-long disappearance. Billionaire found by mystery woman, are they in love? Homeless or undercover? The truth behind Michael Carter's fall and rise. Back at Emily's apartment, 6:45 p.m. She opened the door and nearly dropped the groceries she was holding. Mike was standing in the middle of the room, holding her buzzing phone, his jaw tight. You're trending, he said calmly. What? She rushed over, reading the screen. Thousands of notifications, texts from unknown numbers, journalists, television stations. Someone had recognized them. She looked up at him, heart pounding. What do we do? He held her gaze. You decide. Me? "This is your life too now, Emily," he said. "You brought me back to it. So you get a say in how it goes from here." She could see the pain in his eyes, the vulnerability behind his confidence. He was a man used to commanding empires. Now, for once, he was letting someone else lead the next step. She swallowed hard. "Then we face it together." The conference room at Carter Dynamics was filled to the brim. News crews, shareholders, MDs, the world. Everyone wanted to hear from Michael Carter, the fallen billionaire, the ghost in a hoodie, the man who reappeared not with lawyers or bodyguards, but a girl from the shadows. Emily stood behind him, heart racing, as he stepped up to the podium. He didn't start with business. He started with her. "When I left this company, I had lost faith in everything. I thought loyalty was dead. I thought kindness was transactional. I thought love was for people who had something to give." He turned slightly, meeting Emily's eyes. "But then someone with nothing gave me everything. No name, no reputation, just shelter, warmth, and trust." The room was completely silent. He turned back to the cameras. "So today, I'm announcing a partnership, the Emily Project, a new foundation that will create employment and mentorship for women like her, women who fight every day just to survive. Women who keep showing up, even when no one claps." Emily's eyes flooded with tears. And then came the surprise. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a company key card, the kind only executives received. He turned and offered it to her. "Welcome to the leadership team, Emily. I trust you with what matters most, the future." Flashbulbs went wild. The crowd erupted, but Emily didn't see them. All she saw was him, the man who had once sat in the rain, giving her hope, and now standing in the light, giving her the world. It had been a whirlwind. In just under 2 weeks, Emily had gone from eating pasta in the dark to leading a division at one of the most powerful tech companies in America. And none of it felt real. But it was real. Every morning, she stepped into Carter Dynamics with a badge that had her name on it. Executive Design Director, the Emily Project. Every afternoon, she sat in meetings with people who once would have ignored her resume. And every night, she came home to the man who had once offered her a $100 bill in the rain. Only now he wasn't sleeping on the couch. Now he was the person she woke up next to. There was no dramatic confession, no grand speech or sudden kiss. Instead, it happened the way real things often do, quietly. Mike started making coffee every morning just the way she liked it. He learned how she hummed when she was focused, how she always forgot to take her tea bag out, and how she drew tiny hearts in the margins of her sketchbooks without realizing. And Emily? She learned what no one ever knew about Michael Carter, that he hated wearing suits, that he once had a stutter as a child and worked for years to speak with clarity, that he'd never once celebrated his own birthday because growing up, there was nothing to celebrate. They never said, "I love you," not yet. But it was there, in the silence, in the stolen glances, in the safety. It was a rainy Sunday when she heard the knock, soft, hesitant, familiar. Emily opened the door and gasped. Her mother, the woman who had vanished from her life when Emily was 17. The woman who chose a string of broken men over the daughter she once claimed to love. Her face was thinner, her coat frayed, but her eyes, they were the same. "Emily," she whispered, "I saw you on the news. I didn't know how else to reach you." Emily stood frozen, every part of her aching. "I don't want money," her mother said quickly. "I swear. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was scared. I made stupid decisions. But I never stopped thinking about you." Mike appeared quietly behind Emily, his presence grounding her. I need a minute," Emily whispered. He nodded and stepped back, giving her space. They sat across from each other on the edge of the couch. Emily spoke first. You left me. I was 17. You walked out and never came back. Her mother's eyes filled. I was broken, Em, and I didn't know how to fix it. Emily's voice shook. Do you have any idea what I went through? I went hungry. I begged landlords not to evict me. I failed classes because I was working 3 jobs. And all the while I kept wondering if you'd walk through the door and say you were sorry. Her mother wiped a tear. I am sorry. I was weak and selfish, but I came here not to ask forgiveness, just to let you know you didn't deserve any of what happened. Emily looked at her for a long time. I'm not the same girl you left behind, she said. And I don't hate you, but I'm not ready to open that door fully. Her mother nodded. I understand. Then softly, you turned out so strong, baby. I'm proud of you. When her mother left, Emily stood at the window for a long time, watching the rain blur the city. Mike came beside her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. You okay? He asked. She leaned into him. I think I will be. 2 weeks later, Carter Dynamics hosted a formal gala, a red carpet evening filled with investors, public figures, and the media. It was the first time Michael Carter would officially address the business world since his disappearance. Emily wore a deep navy gown, her hair swept up, heels clicking on marble floors like they belonged there because now they did. Mike stood at the podium, dressed in a crisp charcoal suit, but his speech wasn't about profits or projections. It was about people. When I vanished, he said, I thought I'd lost everything. And then I met someone who reminded me that everything can look like nothing when you're too focused on numbers instead of hearts. He looked at Emily in the crowd. Their eyes locked. I want to build a future that makes room for people like her, people with talent, kindness, and grit. And that future starts now. Then he stepped from the podium and walked straight to her. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't have to. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, stunning, and said, I don't care about headlines or companies or legacies. I care about you. Will you marry me? Emily froze not from fear, but from the overwhelming sound of her own heartbeat. She smiled through the tears. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. The room exploded with applause. Flashbulbs. Cheers. But they didn't hear it. They only saw each other. It wasn't the board. It was Claire. Claire Hemmings, Michael's ex-fiancée. The one who'd left him when the scandal hit. The one who ghosted him with a note that read, I'm not built for broken men. What Emily didn't know, what Michael had never dared to say aloud, was that Claire hadn't just walked away. She had helped bring him down. Claire hadn't always been cold. There had been a time when Michael believed she was the one, polished, educated, charming in front of investors. But behind closed doors, she'd become obsessed with power, more concerned about his status than his soul. When the federal investigation came down, Claire panicked. She cut a deal with one of Michael's competitors, testifying behind closed doors that he'd known about the subcontractor's criminal activity. Her statements were vague but damaging enough to turn public perception. In exchange, she received a silent payout and vanished. Until now. It was supposed to be a normal board update. Emily sat beside Michael, her notes organized, her project updates ready. Then the conference room door opened, and Claire walked in. Every inch of her was curated to perfection. Sleek black dress, red lipstick, pearl earrings. She looked like she'd walked out of a magazine. Emily stiffened instantly. Michael went pale. Claire, he said under his breath. Michael, she replied smoothly. You look cleaner than I remember." The board members greeted her with familiarity. "She's advising the new strategic acquisition," one of them explained. "Temporary contract." Michael clenched his jaw. "You brought her in without telling me?" "It's just business," they said. Emily watched Claire's eyes slide toward her, not with curiosity, but calculation. "So this is the girl who replaced me. This is who he threw everything away for." Claire smiled tightly. "You must be Emily. I've heard fascinating things about you." Emily straightened her shoulders. "You've probably heard a lot. Doesn't mean any of it's true." Michael looked between them, sensing the tension, but unsure what move to make. Claire sat down across the table, her voice smooth as silk. "Let's talk about legacy, shall we?" Later that night, they returned home in silence. Michael poured 2 glasses of wine. Neither of them touched it. Emily finally spoke. "She still wants something." Michael nodded. "She always did. Do you think she's here to destroy you?" He looked at Emily, really looked at her. "No," he said. "She's here to destroy us." Emily had grown stronger. She wasn't the broken girl who fell in the rain. She wasn't scared of women like Claire anymore. She spent the next 3 nights quietly researching, reading old filings, archived press releases, even court documents Michael never saw. She talked to a freelance journalist friend and traced a pattern. Claire had testified anonymously. Her statement matched leaks that hit the press a day later. And she had ties to Jonas Rivers, the CEO of a rival firm who had bid on Carter Dynamics during the scandal. It was a setup. Emily brought the evidence to Michael. "She sold you out," she said softly. "And now she's back to finish what she started." Michael stared at the documents, years of betrayal coming into focus. "She didn't just leave me," he whispered. "She helped bury me." Emily touched his hand. "But you're not buried anymore. You're standing. You've got the truth. And now, you've got me." He looked at her, and in that moment, he knew he didn't just owe her gratitude. He owed her everything. The war had begun quietly, dangerously, and without a single warning shot. Claire Hemmings wasn't just another ex out for revenge. She was calculating, deeply connected, and smart enough to hide her claws behind designer gloves. Now, with the board's trust and access to internal systems, she was closer to Michael and Emily than ever close enough to strike. But what she didn't expect was how fiercely they would fight back. Emily and Michael had planned a small ceremony at the marina overlooking the Puget Sound. A sunset wedding. Simple. Private. A gathering of close friends, Carter Dynamics allies, and a few supportive team members. Emily had bought a satin ivory dress from a small boutique. Michael had chosen a gray suit, not black, because he said he wanted to feel like a new man, not a shadow of who he used to be. Everything was set. Until the leak. 2 days before the wedding, a video surfaced. A clip. No sound. Just fuzzy security footage of Michael and Emily in an elevator months ago, the day after he first stayed at her place. The timestamp showed him entering her apartment building at night and leaving in the early morning. The headline? Was the romance built on a lie? Did Emily Carter trade shelter for shares in Carter Dynamics? The story exploded. Social media turned vicious overnight. She seduced him to climb the ladder. She was never qualified. She took in a beggar because she recognized the brand behind the beard. Emily tried not to look at her phone, but the damage was done. Strangers were picking apart her life, her love, her integrity. Even Rachel, the head of HR, once one of her greatest supporters, called a private meeting. "I believe you," Rachel said carefully, "but the optics are messy. We're under pressure to slow down the Emily project's rollout until things quiet down." Emily's heart sank. "They're trying to erase everything we built," she whispered to Michael that night. He nodded grimly. "They're not going to stop with the program. You're the target now." That night, Claire visited Emily at her apartment. No cameras, no assistants, just Claire and a poisonous smile. "I came to offer you a way out," she said, stepping inside uninvited. "Leave. Resign from Carter Dynamics. Walk away from him. In exchange, I'll make sure the board keeps your little program alive." Emily didn't blink. "Why would I trust you?" Claire's gaze hardened. "Because I know how this ends. You think he'll protect you. But men like Michael always go back to their world, to their kind." Emily stood still, fury rising in her chest. "You left him when he had nothing. I loved him when the world hated his name." Claire laughed coldly. "You're a phase, a story. When the press gets bored, so will he." Emily stepped forward, close enough to look her in the eye. "Then you don't know him at all." Claire stared at her, then smiled. "War it is." The next day, Emily was removed from the Carter Dynamics server. Her keycard access revoked, her calendar wiped. No formal termination, just a silent erasure. Michael stormed into the executive floor. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. One of the board members replied, "We're protecting the company's image. She's a liability." Michael didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "Then I'm leaving." The room froze. "You... what?" one of them gasped. "You wanted Carter Dynamics back on top? You needed my face, my name, my comeback? Then you accept her, or you get neither." They called it madness, but he walked out anyway. That evening, Michael Carter went live on his personal feed. Millions tuned in. He didn't sit behind a desk or wear a tie. He stood on a balcony with Emily beside him and spoke plainly. "I built $1 billion company, but when I lost everything, only one person looked at me like I was still human. And now, because she stood by me, some want her erased." He looked into the camera. "I'm not losing her. Not again. Not for money. Not for power. If you can't see her worth, then you never saw mine." It was raw, honest, emotional, and it went viral in less than 15 minutes. Michael's speech echoed across the internet like wildfire. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real. And in a world addicted to scandals and sound bites, realness struck deeper than any PR spin ever could. Within 48 hours, Stand With Emily began trending globally. Journalists unearthed Claire's old connections to Jonas Rivers and traced money transfers from offshore accounts to shell companies linked to her. Anonymous whistleblowers, former Carter Dynamics staff, came forward, claiming Claire had manipulated internal affairs to sabotage Emily. Even investors began to pull back not from Michael and Emily, but from the board itself. Carter Dynamics was once again at a crossroads, but this time the people were watching. When Claire walked into the next board meeting, she expected her usual power, but the room was different, colder. Rachel stood waiting, with 2 legal representatives beside her. "Claire Hemmings," Rachel said, "we have evidence of internal sabotage, character defamation, and interference with employee systems. You are hereby terminated, effective immediately." Claire scoffed. "You can't do this. I was brought in by the board." Michael stepped into the room. "And now the board stands with the truth." He set a thick file down in front of her, the evidence Emily had helped collect. "I loved you once," he said quietly, "but I won't let you destroy the one person who loved me when I had nothing." Claire's eyes narrowed, but she knew. It was over. She gathered her bag, heels clicking on marble like a bitter finale, and disappeared down the hall, a villain dethroned by the very people she once dismissed. The next morning, Emily's keycard buzzed green again. Her calendar was restored, her email reactivated. But when she walked in, something was different. Dozens of employees paused and stood. Some clapped. Others just nodded in quiet respect. No more whispers. No more doubts. Emily Carter had earned her place. And now everyone saw it. They held it on a rooftop at sunset. Simple, intimate, just close friends, team members from the Emily Project, and a few journalists who were told to put their cameras away and be human for one night. Emily wore a satin gown. No veil, no frills. Michael wore a tailored suit, no tie, and a small smile that hadn't left his face all day. When she walked down the aisle, there were tears in more than a few eyes. She didn't just walk as a bride, she walked as a survivor. As the woman who had loved a man in the shadows and brought him back into the light. Michael took her hands. I met you when the world had forgotten me. You saw a man when I didn't even see myself. I was nobody, and you loved me anyway. You saved me. Emily's voice trembled. You weren't nobody. You were the man who helped me up when I'd fallen, even when you had nothing to give. You reminded me that kindness matters even when the world doesn't clap for it. The officiant smiled through misty eyes, and when he said, I now pronounce you husband and wife, the city skyline seemed to pause, as if even the stars held their breath. Weeks later, a journalist asked Emily in an interview, Did you ever imagine your life would turn out this way? She smiled. I didn't imagine anything. I just made one choice. I chose to help someone when I had no reason to. And that choice changed everything. 2 years later, the world had moved on the headlines, the drama, the scandal. But for Emily Carter and Michael, now Emily and Michael Carter, what remained was not fame or fortune. It was the memory of a moment that changed both of their lives. A fall, a hand, $100 bills soaked in rain, and a kindness that cost nothing, but meant everything. What began as a simple job offer turned into a nationwide foundation present in 32 cities across the country. Each location had one mission: find the forgotten, feed the hungry, fund the overlooked. Thousands of women and struggling youth had now gone through Emily's mentorship program. Many of them had stories just like hers. She often told them, kindness doesn't need a stage. It just needs a moment. She never took credit, but the world did. Michael and Emily lived in a beautiful brownstone tucked on the quiet end of Seattle's Queen Anne Hill. No flashy mansions, no bodyguards, just simplicity and warmth. There was a garden. Emily kept wild with lavender, rosemary, and forget-me-nots. Mike still cooked her breakfast most mornings. He still used that same sarcastic voice when asking if she remembered to unplug her curling iron. They still laughed, still argued about movie plots, still walked to the corner cafe where they always ordered too much and tipped too big. And every time it rained, Emily still smiled. There's a bench across the street from the old bodega where they first met. The place he sat in a hoodie, watching the world walk by. One afternoon, they went there together, just the two of them. Michael wore a navy sweater. Emily held his hand. They sat in silence for a long while, remembering. He finally said, You know what I was thinking that night? What? That I might be better off disappearing. She looked at him softly. And what changed? You fell, he said faintly, and I remembered what it was like to care. Before they left that bench, Emily pulled something from her coat pocket, an envelope. I wrote this the day we got married, she said, but I never gave it to you. Michael opened it and began to read. Dear Mike, you once told me I saved you, but the truth is, you saved me first, not because of the money. Not because of the job, but because in a world where everyone kept walking, you stopped and helped me up. I used to believe love was loud, but you taught me it's quiet, a voice in the rain, a hand in the dark, a meal on a tired night. So if you ever doubt yourself again, read this. You matter. You always did. You just forgot for a while. Love, always. The girl you helped on the sidewalk. Michael folded the letter, placed it against his chest, and kissed her forehead. The rain began again, soft, gentle, like a reminder. Sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with money, but the ones who have the courage to care when no one else does. She gave a beggar a home, and he gave her back the world. And what they built together, that's what surprised everyone. Thanks for watching. Join me next time for more captivating stories. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Before you go, help me grow this community. Hit that like button for more thrilling content. Subscribe for new uploads. Colorado MMEN below with your theories and reactions. Share with friends and family who love a good story. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for being an amazing part of this journey.